Welcome everyone, I'm Dusky Nights, and before we begin I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below. Also, I want to know what kind of stories you enjoy, and make sure to listen till the end. It started as an ordinary afternoon. My little sister Emily and I were walking home from school like we always did. The streets were quiet, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. Emily, only 8 years old, was happily skipping beside me, humming a tune she'd learned in music class. I, being 12 and far too cool for such things, rolled my eyes but smiled anyway. The walk home wasn't long, maybe 15 minutes, but that day it felt like an eternity. It began when I noticed the black sedan. At first I didn't think much of it. It was just parked at the curb, engine running, a woman in the driver's seat. She had dark sunglasses on, her face partially hidden behind the car's sun visor. I assumed she was waiting for someone, but as we passed, a prickling sensation crawled up my spine, though I couldn't explain why. We kept walking. A minute later I heard the slow roll of tires. I turned my head slightly. The black sedan was moving now, creeping forward at the same pace as us. Something in my stomach twisted. "Emily," I said quietly, "walk faster." "Why?" She blinked up at me, still oblivious. "Just do it." We picked up the pace, so did the car. Then the woman spoke. "Excuse me, girls." Emily stopped immediately, but I grabbed her wrist, keeping her moving. "Wait," the woman called again. "Can you help me? I'm looking for Elmwood Street. Do you know where it is?" There was no Elmwood Street in our town. My heart pounded. I didn't answer. Neither did Emily, though she was glancing at me, confused. The woman's voice took on a sweet, coaxing tone. "Please, sweetheart, just come closer. I'm lost." I yanked Emily's hand, almost dragging her forward. "Hey!" the woman snapped. The sweetness was gone. I risked another glance back. The car had stopped. The woman's sunglasses were now perched on top of her head, revealing sharp, piercing eyes. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She was watching us. We turned the corner onto Maple Avenue, one of the quieter streets. Bad idea. The houses here were spaced farther apart, with tall fences and thick hedges, less visibility, less help. I was about to tell Emily to run when I heard the tires again. The sedan had turned the corner behind us. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed Emily's hand and yanked her toward the park entrance. "But, just come on," I nearly shouted. The park was empty, the swings swaying slightly in the breeze, the trees casting long, eerie shadows. I pulled Emily through the playground, past the empty benches, heading for the wooded path that led to the other side of town. Behind us, the car stopped, the sound of a door opening, then shutting. My heart was a drum in my ears. We ran. Branches whipped at my face as we dashed through the narrow path, my breath coming in sharp gasps. Emily was struggling to keep up, but I didn't dare slow down. Then, the sound of footsteps. Not running, walking. Slow, deliberate steps. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The woman was following us. She wasn't running. She didn't have to. Her presence alone was terrifying enough. The setting sun cast a glow behind her, making her figure look even more menacing. Her hands were in her coat pockets, but I swore I saw something glint. A key? A knife? I didn't wait to find out. "Emily, faster!" Tears streamed down her face as she gasped for air, but she kept going. The trees around us thickened, the path narrowing. I could barely see ahead, but I knew there was a way out. There had to be. Then, Emily tripped. She hit the ground, hard, crying out as she scraped her knee. I spun around, dropping to help her. The footsteps stopped. She was standing just a few feet away. Now, she said softly, her voice laced with something unnatural. "That was quite a fall, sweetheart," Emily whimpered, clutching her knee. I stepped in front of her. "Stay away." The woman tilted her head. "Oh, honey, I was just trying to help." "You're both lost, aren't you?" I could hear my own pulse thundering in my ears. She took another step forward. Then, another sound, a rustling in the bushes behind her. The woman froze. For a moment I thought it was an animal, but then a voice. "Hey, who's there?" A man, deep, firm. The woman's face twisted, and in an instant she spun on her heel, marching back toward the car. I watched, paralyzed, as she disappeared down the path. A second later, the car engine roared to life, and then silent, gone. A man emerged from the trees, a large dog trotting beside him. He looked at us, frowning. "Are you two okay?" I nodded shakily, helping Emily up. "That woman?" I managed to say. She was following us." His expression darkened. "I've seen that car before." The word sent a chill through me. He walked us the rest of the way home. The entire time my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those piercing eyes, that eerie, too sweet voice. Somewhere out there she was still driving, still looking, and I knew, deep in my gut, she'd try again, maybe not with us, but with someone, and that thought haunted me more than anything else. The lights flickered 3 times. Then footsteps, slow, heavy, coming far from the attic. We thought we were alone in the house. We were wrong. I never believed in the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, shadows, just stories to scare kids. But what happened in Sarah's house changed everything. It made me question what lurks beyond the veil of what we call reality. Sarah and I had been best friends since childhood. When she moved into a creaky old house at the edge of town, I was the first to visit. The place had character, she said, tall, narrow, with warped wooden floors that groaned under every step. The attic stretched across the entire upper floor, an eerie, forgotten space filled with old trunks and dust-covered furniture. It was the kind of house that whispered secrets if you listened too closely. At first, everything seemed normal. Sarah even laughed about how the attic door never stayed shut. "It is just old hinges," she would say, pushing it closed again. But over time, strange things started happening. She would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, unable to move. She called it sleep paralysis. She described feeling a heavy presence in her room, like someone was standing at the foot of her bed, watching. She could not see its face, only the outline of a tall, shadowy figure. "I know it sounds crazy," she admitted one evening, "but it is not just in my head. I swear I have seen it move." I tried to reassure her. "Maybe it is just a trick of the light. You are probably just half asleep." She nodded, but did not look convinced. One night, Sarah called me in a panic. "There is straw all over the attic floor. It was not there before." "Straw?" I repeated. "Like someone put it there?" "I do not know," she whispered, "but I cleaned it up yesterday. Now it is back." I went over the next morning. Sure enough, a thin layer of straw was scattered across the attic floor. The air was heavy, stale, carrying a faint, musty scent like damp earth. Something about it made my skin crawl. Maybe it was inside the walls and fell through a crack, I suggested, but my voice lacked conviction. Days passed, then weeks. The presence in Sarah's house grew stronger. She stopped sleeping in her room. Instead, she crashed on the couch, always facing the hallway, as if expecting something to appear. Then, one night, I saw it. I had stayed over, determined to prove there was nothing there. We were watching TV when the attic door creaked open. The temperature in the room plummeted. Sarah grabbed my wrist, her fingers ice cold. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. At first, I did not. Then, a soft scraping sound, like footsteps dragging across the attic floor. We sat, frozen, barely breathing. The scraping moved closer. Then, silence. Sarah reached for her phone, but before she could turn on the flashlight, something shifted in the doorway. A tall, dark figure, its form barely distinguishable from the shadows. It did not move. It did not breathe. It just watched. Cold dread gripped my chest. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. Then it took a step forward. Sarah let out a sharp breath. The air around us grew thick, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. The figure stepped closer. That was all it took. We bolted. Sarah yanked the front door open, and we sprinted into the night, not stopping until we reached my car. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us looked back. Sarah never returned to that house. She moved out the next week, leaving behind everything she owned. The landlord never found a new tenant. The house sat empty, its windows dark, its attic door always slightly ajar. And the worst part, months later, I drove by. The house was abandoned, untouched. But in the attic window, I saw it, a shadow, watching, waiting. Have you ever felt like someone is watching you? Not just once, but everywhere, every single day? I thought it was paranoia, a trick of my mind, until I heard the knock at my door. It started at school, just another ordinary afternoon. I was waiting by the tall metal fence, like always, watching cars rush past. The scent of damp autumn leaves in the air. That was when I noticed Ethan. He was a quiet, lanky kid with messy hair that always hung over his eyes. We had shared a few classes, but I had never really paid attention to him until that day. His voice was casual when he spoke. "Waiting for someone?" I nodded, keeping my reply short. but something about the way he stood too close, the way he tilted his head when he looked at me, felt wrong. "You wait alone every day," he continued, shifting slightly, like he was nervous or impatient. "That is not safe. You never know who is watching." I let out a small laugh. "It is a school, not some dark alley." But his smile did not reach his eyes. "You would be surprised." A strange chill ran down my spine. I checked my phone, pretending to be busy, hoping he would take the hint. He did not. "You do not talk much," he murmured, stepping closer. "That is okay. I like quiet people." His words crawled under my skin. I took a step back, my shoulder hitting the cold metal fence. "I should call my mom," I said quickly, my voice steadier than I felt. Ethan did not flinch. He just smiled, his gaze fixed on me. "You know, I see you every day, always standing here, always alone." Before I could react, he reached out, brushing the sleeve of my jacket. "Ever think about what would happen if someone just took you?" Panic surged through me. My breath hitched. "Do not touch me," I snapped, stepping sideways. He smirked. "Relax. I am just messing with you." Then I heard a car approaching, my mom's silver sedan. Relief flooded me. I grabbed my bag, heart pounding, and hurried toward the curb. Just before I got in, Ethan leaned slightly toward me. "See you tomorrow." His voice was soft, knowing. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I checked my windows twice, making sure the curtains were drawn. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just a weird kid trying to be funny. But deep down, I knew better. And the next day, he was there again, waiting, smiling, watching. For days, he found me. No matter what exit I used, no matter how fast I walked, he was always there. Then, the messages started. First, they were anonymous, but I knew it was him. "You look nice today. I like your hair down. I saw you laughing in class." Cute. I blocked the number. Another one appeared, and another. One evening, as I walked home from the bus stop, the street quiet, the streetlights flickering, I felt it, that awful, suffocating feeling of being followed. I turned. Ethan stood just a few feet away, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly. "You really do not like talking to me, do you?" My house was close. I could run. I could scream. "You should not ignore people," he said softly. "It is rude." My pulse thundered. I forced my feet to move. "Leave me alone, Ethan." I turned and ran, my keys already in my hand. Footsteps followed, slow, steady. I reached my door, fumbled with the lock, slammed it shut. Silence, then a soft knock. I froze. Slowly, I peered through the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty, but I knew he was still out there, watching, waiting. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I spoke up. I told my teacher, then the school counselor. At first, I feared they would not believe me, but then they checked the security cameras. There he was, standing outside the school long after everyone left, lingering near my bus stop, watching my house from across the street. Ethan was expelled. A restraining order was issued, but even with all of that, I still felt like I was being watched. Months passed. I forced myself to forget, to move on. Then, one night, my phone buzzed. No name, no number, just 3 words. I still see you. The first bite felt wrong, familiar, yet unsettling. A metallic aftertaste lingered on my tongue, making my stomach twist. Then I saw it, the deep red seeping through the bandages on my leg. My heart slammed against my ribs as I glanced up at the man across the table. His calm, knowing smile sent a cold shiver down my spine. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. My vision blurred for a moment, my mind struggling to piece everything together. The air was thick with the scent of butter and garlic, but beneath it there was something else, something sickening. My throat tightened as I tried to speak, but the only sound that escaped was a dry, hoarse breath. I blinked hard, trying to focus. The flickering candlelight cast twisted shadows across the dimly lit room. My wrists were bound tightly to the arms of a wooden chair, thick leather straps digging into my skin. My legs, limp and numb, refused to move. Panic clawed at my chest as I struggled, my breathing growing ragged. Then a voice, smooth and almost welcoming, broke the silence. "Ah, you are awake." I turned my head, my pulse hammering in my ears. He stood by the table, dressed in a spotless white apron, his sleeves neatly rolled up. He looked composed, patient, as if this were routine. "You must be hungry," he said, motioning toward the table. A silver platter sat at the center, steam curling into the air. The lid lifted with a soft clink, revealing a glistening plate of meat. The scent was rich, buttery, and yet something about it made my stomach churn. I swallowed hard. "Where am I?" My voice was weak. He smiled, unbothered by my fear. "In my home, of course. I have prepared something special for you." his fingers curled around a fork as he sliced into the meat, placing a piece onto a smaller plate and sliding it toward me. "Go on," he murmured. "Eat." My breath hitched. I do not want it. My hands clenched into fists, my entire body screaming for escape. His jaw twitched slightly. "Taste it." He raised the fork to my lips, and I had no choice. I opened my mouth, the warm, tender meat resting on my tongue. The flavor was rich but bitter. My stomach twisted violently. Then I felt it. A sharp, burning pain shot through my leg. A cry tore from my throat as my gaze snapped downward. The bandages, thick, blood-stained wrappings, clung to my skin, soaking red. The realization hit me like a crushing wave. My breath came in shallow gasps. I gagged, the taste in my mouth suddenly unbearable. The man sighed, setting the fork down. "I thought you would appreciate it." His voice carried a note of disappointment. "Not many have the chance to savor themselves." The room spun around me, my mind struggling to grasp the horror of his words. "Why are you doing this?" my voice cracked. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "Because you waste what you are given. You live your life without ever knowing what you are truly made of." He smirked. "Now you know." My entire body trembled, my instincts screaming at me to run, to fight. My fingers twitched against the leather straps. Then I saw it, the knife, glinting under the candlelight, just inches away. My chance, my only chance. He turned his back, moving toward the stove. Summoning every ounce of strength, I yanked against the restraints, pain searing through my skin. My fingers stretched, barely brushing the handle. Then, slip, a sharp clatter echoed through the room. His head snapped toward me, his expression darkening. "Duh, duh." He picked up the knife, twirling it between his fingers. That was not very polite. My body shook violently. "Please, let me go." He crouched beside me, tilting his head. "And waste such a fine meal." A sudden bang, the front door. His head whipped around, hesitation flickering across his face. Footsteps. My heart leaped. I sucked in a breath and screamed with everything I had. "Help! Someone help me!" His snarl twisted into pure rage. He grabbed my jaw, his grip crushing. "You ruined it." Another bang, then light. The door burst open. Voices, shouts, chaos. Everything blurred, everything faded. I woke to the rhythmic beeping of machines, harsh White light filled my vision, the sterile scent of antiseptic burning my nose. A nurse hovered nearby. "You are safe now," but my mind refused to believe it. My chest ached with the weight of memories I wanted to erase. A police officer stood at the foot of my bed, his expression grim. "You are lucky," he said. "He has done this before. You are the only one who survived." My throat went dry. My fingers curled into the sheets. Somewhere in the depths of my mind, I knew this was not over. He was still out there, watching, waiting for his next meal. I was 6 years old when I first learned what real fear felt like. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the sky turns a deep orange before fading into an eerie shade of blue. My mother, Lisa, was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner, while I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through a storybook. The house smelled of warm soup and freshly baked bread. Then came the knock. It was loud, deliberate, not the gentle, rhythmic tap of a neighbor or a friend. No one ever used the front door in our house. We always came and went through the back. The unexpected sound sent a strange chill down my spine. I hesitated, then tiptoed toward the staircase and peered over the railing. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see a tall, shadowy figure standing motionless. His presence felt wrong. Then he spoke. "Annie," the man called softly. His voice was smooth but slightly off, like a recording played at the wrong speed. "Is your mommy home?" I froze. How did he know my name? A slow, uneasy feeling crept into my stomach. I turned and rushed toward the kitchen. "Mom," I whispered urgently, "there's a man at the door. He knows my name." My mother frowned, wiping her hands on a towel before following me to the hallway. She glanced through the peephole. The way her shoulders stiffened made my heart pound. "Go to your room," she said, her voice tight. I obeyed but left the door slightly open. I watched as she unlocked the door but only opened it a few inches. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping her tone firm. The man shifted. He was smiling. Even from where I stood I could see it. A wide, unsettling grin that never reached his eyes. "I was just passing by," he said smoothly. "Thought I'd say hello." My mother didn't respond. "Your little girl," the man continued, tilting his head slightly. "She's adorable. So polite." My mother's grip on the door tightened. "You need to leave," she said. For a moment the man just stood there. Then his smile widened, too wide. His head tilted just a little too far. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. My mother locked the door, double-checked it, then triple-checked it. But I still felt him watching. The phone call that night, after I was tucked into bed, I heard the phone ring. My mother answered, and for the first few seconds she didn't say a word. Then I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. Heavy breathing, slow, deliberate, like someone standing just out of reach, exhaling right into the receiver. "Who is this?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp. A pause, then, very softly, "I liked your blue dress today, Annie." Click. The line went dead. I wasn't wearing a blue dress, but earlier that day I had worn one while playing outside. He had been watching. The shadow in the yard. The next night, the power went out. It happened suddenly, plunging the house into complete darkness. My mother muttered something about the breaker and grabbed a flashlight. Then we heard it, a faint rustling outside, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching against fallen leaves. My mother grabbed my hand and pulled me close. "Stay here," she whispered. I should have listened. Instead, I tiptoed toward the window and peeked through the curtains. My breath caught in my throat. There, Just beyond the fence stood a figure, the same man, only this time he wasn't alone. A second figure stood beside him, shorter, hunched. They were both staring right at my window. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The noise must have startled them because the taller one suddenly raised his hand and waved. Slow, mocking. I ran to my mother. "He's outside," I gasped. She grabbed the phone. The line was dead. A loud bang echoed through the house. The back door. "Go to my room," my mother ordered, her voice shaking now. "Lock the door." I did as I was told, my whole body trembling. From behind the locked door, I could hear my mother moving quickly, grabbing something. I think a knife. Silence. Then footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps. Not my mother's. I held my breath, squeezing my eyes shut. Then, sirens. A flash of red and blue lights flooded through the window, and just like that, the presence outside was gone. Aftermath. The police searched the yard, but there was no sign of him. No footprints, no forced entry. Just an open gate swaying slightly in the wind. But here's the thing. The second figure, the hunched one, the police never found any evidence of a second person. My mother told me I must have imagined it. But I know what I saw. For weeks after that, I felt him. Watching. Waiting. I never saw him again. Not really. But sometimes, late at night, when everything was quiet, I would hear it. A soft knock at the front door. And I never, ever answered. Have you ever felt eyes on you when you were alone? I ignored that feeling until the notes appeared, until the photos, until I realized the person watching me was already inside. I never thought much about privacy until I learned what it meant to be watched. It started subtly, a misplaced object, a notification that did not seem quite right. At first I dismissed it. Maybe I had just forgotten where I had left my keys. Maybe my phone had glitched. But soon I realized I was not imagining things. I had moved into a new apartment, fresh out of a breakup. It was a quiet building, mostly occupied by professionals who kept to themselves. That suited me fine. I needed space, a fresh start. One evening, while unpacking, my phone buzzed. "Nice place. Feels like home, does it not?" My stomach tightened. The number was unknown. I glanced around my small living room, half expecting to see someone peering through the window, but there was nothing. Just the hum of the fridge, the soft rustling of the trees outside. Maybe it was a prank. I ignored it. The next evening, I came home from work and noticed my front door slightly ajar. My heart pounded as I pushed it open. Everything looked normal. The kitchen chairs were in place. The TV remote sat on the coffee table, exactly where I had left it. But the air felt wrong, heavy. I checked every room, every closet. Nothing was out of place. Still, I could not shake the feeling that someone had been there. The messages continued. "You seemed tired today. Rough day at work. That sweater brings out your eyes." I stopped wearing the sweater. Then, one night, as I was brushing my teeth, my phone vibrated on the sink. "You should really close your window at night." A chill ran down my spine. I turned slowly, my gaze snapping to my bedroom window. It was open, just a crack. Had I left it like that? I could not remember. I rushed over and slammed it shut, locking it tight. My skin crawled. I called the police. They asked if I had received any direct threats. When I said no, they suggested blocking the number. They could not do much else. So I changed my number. For a while things were quiet. I began to believe it had been a coincidence, a mistake, maybe even a bad joke from someone at work. Then, one morning I found a note. It was slipped under my door, a small, square piece of paper. "Do you think about me?" My hands trembled as I crumpled it up. A week later I found something worse, a photo of me, asleep in my bed. The angle, the lighting, whoever took it had been inside my room. I called the police again. This time they took it seriously. Officers checked my locks, my windows. They found no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend. That night, I packed a bag. My best friend, Lila, told me to come over. She insisted. But before I could leave, I heard it. A soft click. I froze. The sound came from the hallway. My phone was in my hand, but I could not move. My breath hitched as I turned my head. The closet door was open. I had not left it open. I forced myself forward, my keys gripped tightly between my fingers. The door creaked as I pushed it wider. Nothing. And then I saw it. A small black lens, a hidden camera, nestled between my sweaters. My stomach lurched. Someone had been watching me, in my own home, while I slept. I ran. I did not stop until I reached Leela's. She begged me to call the police again, but I needed to think. Who had a key? My landlord? A neighbor? Someone from work? Then, a name surfaced in my mind. Ethan. We had dated briefly before I moved. He had always been intense, always wanted to know where I was, who I was with. At first, I had thought it was just protectiveness, but now I was not so sure. That night I did not sleep. Every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. In the morning I received one final message. Why are you hiding? That was it. I packed up my life and left. Changed cities, new job, new locks. For a while I believed I was safe. Until last week. I was at a cafe sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone. Then, that feeling returned. The sensation of being watched. My skin prickled. I looked up and there he was. Not Ethan, not a stranger. My new landlord. He raised his phone, he smiled, and I knew I was never really gone. Some people think they are safe once they leave, but what if the person watching is always one step ahead? If you have ever had an experience like this, share it below. And remember, always check your locks, your windows, and most importantly, your... I never believed anything truly bad could happen to me. Bad things happen to other people. People in crime documentaries or scary stories told at sleepovers. But that night I learned how quickly everything can change. It started like any ordinary Friday. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me home alone. I was 17, and being left alone wasn't a big deal. I actually liked the freedom. No curfews. No one is nagging me about my messy room. Just me, the TV, and a fridge full of junk food. Around 9:30 p.m. I grabbed a bowl of popcorn and crashed on the couch, scrolling through horror movies. It felt ironic watching people make stupid decisions in scary situations, thinking, I'd never be that dumb. I settled on a classic slasher flick, turned off all the lights, and let the eerie soundtrack fill the empty house. About halfway through the movie, I heard something outside. A voice, low, hushed, then another. Laughter, but not the friendly kind. It was sharp, almost mocking. I muted the TV. My heart pounded. The voices were right outside my house. I peeked through the living room blinds, careful not to move them too much. 3 figures stood at the edge of my driveway, just outside the reach of the streetlight. I could feel them looking at my house. And then, one of them pointed at me. I stumbled back. My breath caught in my throat. The laughter stopped. Silence. A heavy, unnatural silence that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I stood frozen for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. When I finally dared to peek again, they were gone. I told myself it was nothing, maybe just some guys messing around, maybe drunk, maybe looking for trouble, but not serious trouble. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I double-checked the front door, locked, same with the back. Then I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door too, and sat on my bed, forcing myself to breathe. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend, Jake. Hey, I think I just saw some creeps outside my house. Jake, what the fuck? Are they still there? Me, I don't know, they disappeared. Jake, call the cops if they come back. I started typing a reply, but then, crash, glass shattering downstairs. I nearly dropped my phone. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. For a second, I thought I imagined it that my mind was playing tricks on me, but then I heard footsteps. Inside the house, slow, careful. I couldn't move. Then a voice, deep, low, almost amused, spoke from downstairs. "Where are you, little man?" I scrambled up, my brain screaming at me to do something. I locked myself in my closet and held my breath, trying to stay as quiet as possible. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. I dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The operator answered, but before I could speak, the floorboards outside my room creaked. They were upstairs. Tears burned my eyes. I whispered, barely audible, "Someone broke into my house. They're inside." The operator's voice was calm, steady. "Stay where you are. Keep quiet. Officers are on their way." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Then, the doorknob to my room rattled. A pause. Then, bang! They were kicking the door. I choked back a sob. Then another voice, closer than before. "We know you're in there." I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there. My brain raced. I had no weapon, no way out, unless... I sucked in a breath, and in the firmest voice I could muster, I yelled, "I have a gun!" Silence. For a split second I thought it worked. Then, laughter. A dark, taunting chuckle. "No, you don't." I swallowed hard. The closet was small, cramped. My fingers grazed an old baseball bat, useless against a gun, but if they didn't have one? Then, sirens. Loud, close. Relief and fear crashed over me at once. The intruders cursed. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. The front door slammed open. More sirens, shouting, flashing lights through the window, and then silence. I didn't move, not until I heard an officer's voice calling out. It took me several tries to get my legs to work. When I finally stepped out of the closet, I saw my bedroom door kicked in, hanging off the hinges. The cops searched the house. No sign of them. The broken window in the kitchen was the only evidence they were ever there. They had escaped. I barely remember answering the officers' questions. My head was spinning, my body shaking so badly I thought I'd collapse. They stayed with me until my parents rushed home early the next morning. The next few days were a blur of police reports, security upgrades, and sleepless nights. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, watching. The police never found them, but sometimes, even now, I wake up in the middle of the night, sure that I heard something just outside my window, listening. Children see things we don't. That's what they say, right? I never believed it, until the night my cousin pointed into the darkness and said, "He's watching us." I never liked babysitting at my uncle's house. It wasn't run down or haunted or anything, just off. The kind of place where the air felt too still, where the silence stretched a little too long. It was a Friday night. My uncle and aunt were out for a late dinner, and I was watching their two kids, Ella, who was 5, and Jack, who had just turned 4. The night had been pretty uneventful. A movie, some snacks, and then bedtime. I tucked them into their shared room, switched on their night light, and closed the door halfway. The baby monitor sat on the kitchen counter, the soft hum of white noise filtering through. Finally, some time to myself. I curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone, the TV playing quietly in the background. The only sounds were the occasional creak of the old house settling. Normal. Then, a whisper. At first I thought I imagined it. I glanced toward the hallway, half expecting to see one of the kids peeking out. Nothing. I shook it off and went back to my phone. A few minutes later, another whisper, this time my name. I sat up, my pulse picking up speed. The baby monitor. The static buzzed softly, and underneath it, I could hear Ella's small voice. I grabbed the monitor and turned up the volume. "Jack, wake up!" Silence. A few seconds passed. Then, very quietly, "There's someone in the room." I felt a sharp chill crawl up my spine. I sat frozen, my fingers gripping the monitor too tightly. Jack mumbled something, half asleep. Ella's voice came again, urgent. "He's standing by the closet." My breath hitched. I turned my head toward the hallway again. The bedroom door was still halfway open, the dim glow of the nightlight spilling into the hall. Everything looked normal, but my gut told me something wasn't right. I stood up slowly, my heart hammering. Step by step, I made my way to their room, trying to shake off the prickling sensation crawling over my skin. I reached the doorway and peeked inside. Ella was sitting up in bed, clutching her stuffed bunny, eyes fixed on the closet across the room. Jack was still lying down, but his eyes were open now, looking in the same direction. I followed their gaze. The closet door was slightly open, just a crack. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay calm. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Ella didn't look away. "The man." My stomach dropped. "There's no one there, Ella," I said, stepping into the room. "It's just a dream. Go back to sleep, okay?" She turned to look at me, her expression serious in a way that 5-year-olds shouldn't be. "Oh, he's hiding now." A cold shiver ran through me. I glanced at the closet again. It was one of those old wooden ones with sliding doors, the kind that always rattled when you moved them. I knew it had been shut earlier. My throat felt dry. I hesitated, then took a step toward it. The kids watched me, wide-eyed, their small hands gripping the blanket. I reached out. The door moved, just a tiny shift, but I saw it. I yanked my hand back as if burned, my pulse skyrocketing. Every hair on my body stood on end. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, from inside the closet, a soft tap, like a fingertip against wood. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Ella whimpered, and that snapped me out of it. I grabbed her and Jack, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the baby monitor. I backed out of the room, never taking my eyes off the closet. As soon as we were in the hallway, I turned and bolted for the bathroom. We barely made it inside before I slammed the door shut and locked it. The kids were crying now, clinging to me, their little bodies shaking. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to hear anything. Silence. Then soft footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway. I covered my mouth to stop a gasp. Jack buried his face into my shirt, sobbing. Ella just kept whispering over and over, "He's still here." I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator answered, but I could barely get the words out. "There's someone in the house." She started asking questions, but I couldn't focus. The footsteps had stopped. Right outside the door. My heart felt like it was about to explode. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying, begging for the police to get here faster. Then a soft, deliberate tap on the bathroom door. Tears pricked my eyes. Ella clutched my arm so tight it hurt. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Silence. A minute passed. Then another. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of sirens. Suddenly, the tap on the door stopped. A shuffle. Then nothing. Minutes felt like hours. Then, finally, "Police?" I exhaled a shaky breath and unlocked the door. The living room lights were still on. The front door was wide open. The police searched the house, every room, every closet, nothing. No sign of a break-in, no muddy footprints. Just the closet door, now completely open, and the window in the kids' room, unlocked. A slow, sickening realization sank in. Someone had been inside, watching, hiding, and the worst part, I never heard them leave. Have you ever felt something watching you? Not just a feeling, but something real. I thought I was imagining it, until I saw her reflection in the mirror. She was never supposed to be there. Certain moments in life make you feel observed. An unexplainable presence lingers. I never believed in the supernatural, but after that night, my certainty wavered. It began as a simple weekend trip with my friend Sam. We aimed to visit a quiet town known for its deserted railway station. Rumors claimed it was cursed, haunted by spirits of travelers who never arrived. I dismissed these tales as local folklore meant to spook outsiders. The drive started peacefully. Trees flanked the road, their dark forms swaying under dim streetlights. As we progressed, traffic thinned until we were alone. Sam drove, humming to a tune on the radio. I reclined, scrolling through my phone. A flicker in the rearview mirror caught my eye, a shape in the back seat, a shadow. I turned swiftly. Nothing. "You okay?" Sam glanced at me. "Yeah, just thought I saw something." He chuckled. "Already spooked? We haven't even reached the haunted spot yet." I forced a smile, attributing it to a trick of the light. Yet unease settled in. Upon arriving at the railway station, the atmosphere shifted. An unnatural silence hung heavy, as if the world held its breath. The platform lay before us, worn and cracked. Rusted tracks vanished into darkness. An old train car stood at the line's end, forgotten. We weren't alone. A group of tourists waited for the guide. A woman in a long coat stood near the platform's edge, staring at the train. Her face was obscured by her hood's shadow. The tour commenced with the station's eerie history. Accidents, disappearances, whispers of lingering spirits. I listened, but my gaze kept returning to the woman. She remained motionless. Then the old train car's door creaked open. The guide frowned. "That should be locked." Some laughed nervously, thinking it part of the act, but I sensed a shift in the air, a pressing weight on my chest. Sam nudged me. "Let's check it out." We stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and something rotten. Seats were torn, stuffing spilling out. Overhead lights flickered weakly. A soft click. The door slammed shut behind us. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Did you close that?" Sam shook his head, face pale. He reached for the handle. It wouldn't budge. Then the train started moving. The others remained outside. We were alone inside, yet the train rolled forward, gaining speed. Sam pounded on the door. "Hey, stop the train!" No response. I turned, breath catching. The woman sat in the last row, hood pushed back. Her face was distorted, eyes sunken deep. I grabbed Sam's arm. "We need to get out, now." We ran to the next car. It was empty. Windows covered in grime blocked our view. The train rattled violently, echoing through the narrow space. A whisper, low, cold. "Sit down." I turned sharply. The woman was gone. Seats creaked as if something unseen moved. Sam pulled the emergency brake. Nothing happened. Whispers grew louder, surrounding us, pressing against my ears. I couldn't discern the words, but felt them urging us to stay. The train jerked, throwing us forward. Lights burst above, plunging us into darkness. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate knock from the other side of the door. Sam gripped my arm. "Don't open it." The knocking continued. Steady, unhurried. I swallowed hard, hands trembling. The door slid open on its own. We stared into the next compartment. It was filled with people dressed in old-fashioned clothing, faces blank, eyes empty. One by one they turned to look at us. The woman stood among them, smiling that terrible, hollow smile. "We've been waiting for you." The train screeched to a stop. The next thing I knew, I was outside, lying on the cold platform. Sam was next to me, gasping for breath. The train was gone. The tour guide rushed over. "Where did you go? You disappeared." We looked at each other, unable to speak. No one believed us. The train had not moved. The door had never opened. But I knew what I saw. As we drove away that night, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The woman was sitting in the back seat, watching, waiting. I awoke to the sound of slow, creaking footsteps outside my bedroom door. My parents were asleep. I was supposed to be alone. But someone was standing just beyond the threshold, waiting. Winter break always felt like a time of comfort. Warm blankets, holiday movies, and long conversations with family. This year was different. It started when my mom told me her childhood friend, Mark, would stay with us for a few weeks. He had lost his job and needed a place to stay. I did not question it. I had no reason to. When he arrived, he was all smiles. His voice was smooth, and he had a way of making every sentence sound like a joke. He seemed friendly, maybe too friendly. From the beginning, something about him unsettled me, but I brushed it off. I was being paranoid, right? The first few days were normal. He spent time with my parents, helped around the house, and laughed at the dinner table, like he had been part of the family forever. But I noticed small things. The way his eyes lingered too long when I walked into the room, the way he asked questions that felt too personal. How many friends do you have? Any boyfriends? His tone was casual, but something about the question made my stomach twist. I started avoiding him when I could. I spent more time in my room, headphones on, pretending to be busy. But he always seemed to find a way to talk to me. "You are quiet," he said one evening when I was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. "That is a good thing. Some girls talk too much." The words were innocent enough, but they felt heavy. I forced a smile and left the room. I told myself I was imagining it. Then came the night of the storm. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. My parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me alone with Mark. I stayed in my room, hoping he would not bother me. But after a while, there was a knock at my door. "You okay in there?" His voice was too close. I hesitated before answering. "Yeah, just watching something." "Want some company?" I swallowed hard. "No, I am good." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "All right, just checking on you." I listened as his footsteps faded down the hallway. My heart was still racing. Why was he checking on me? I was not a child. I knew something was off. That night, I barely slept. I kept my door locked, the blankets pulled up to my chin like a shield. When I finally drifted off, I woke up to the sound of the floor creaking outside my door. I held my breath, my fingers gripping the edge of the blanket. The sound lingered for a moment, then disappeared. The next morning, I asked my parents how long Mark would be staying. My mom frowned. "Just until he gets back on his feet." Why? I wanted to tell her everything. The staring, the comments, the way he made my skin crawl. But instead, I just shook my head. No reason. Over the next few days, things only got worse. I caught him standing too close, lingering in the doorway of whatever room I was in. Once he brushed past me in the hallway, his hand barely touching my arm. But it was enough to send a shiver through me. Then I found the notebook. It was sitting on the coffee table, half open. I was not the type to snoop, but something about it caught my eye. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. My stomach dropped. My name, over and over, in different handwriting styles, as if he had been practicing. Small notes beside each entry. Wears her hair up most days. Likes to read in the evenings. Usually in her room by 9 p.m., my heart pounded. I put the notebook back exactly as I found it and hurried to my room. I locked the door and sat on my bed trying to steady my breathing. This was not normal. This was not okay. I needed to tell my parents. That night, at dinner, I tried to act normal. My fork trembled as I picked at my food. Mark was laughing with my dad, like nothing was wrong, like he was not writing about me, watching me. I could not take it anymore. "Mom, can we talk?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. She glanced at me, a little surprised. "Of course. What is wrong?" Before I could answer, Mark cut in. "Everything okay, kiddo?" My throat tightened. The way he said it made my skin crawl. "Yeah, just need to talk to Mom." I saw his expression shift slightly, like he knew, like he could sense what I was about to do. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. My mom and I went into the other room. I told her everything. The staring, the comments, the notebook. She listened, her face growing pale. She did not hesitate. She called my dad in, and when they confronted Mark, his reaction was chilling. He did not deny it. He just laughed. "Come on, she is overreacting." My dad's face darkened. "Pack your stuff, now." Mark scoffed, shaking his head, but he saw the seriousness in my father's eyes. He left that night. We never saw him again. For weeks, I still felt uneasy, like his presence lingered in the house. I kept my doors locked. I double-checked the windows. It took me a long time to feel safe again. Then, months later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name on the front. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single note, handwritten in familiar, practiced script. "I will see you soon." The school was empty, or so I thought. Then the piano played a single note by itself. My breath hitched. A whisper followed, so close it chilled my skin. "You left me here." Mornings at school always felt different when the hallways were empty. The usual noise of students chatting, footsteps scuffing against the floor, and lockers slamming shut was gone. Instead, there was silence, thick and heavy, stretching down the corridors that day. I had arrived earlier than usual. I needed to grab a book I had left behind in my locker. The building was almost deserted. Only a faint humming sound came from the janitor's closet, where Mr. Fields was likely listening to his old radio. As I walked, the fluorescent lights flickered above me. The air was still, too still, as if the whole school was holding its breath. Then, from somewhere down the hall, I heard it, a voice, soft, distant, but unmistakable. Someone was humming a tune. I stopped mid-step, my heart skipping a beat. The sound was coming from the far end of the hallway, near the music room. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a teacher preparing for class. Maybe another early student playing around. But as I took a few hesitant steps forward, the humming grew clearer. It was slow, haunting, and filled with something I could not quite place. Sadness? Longing? I hesitated, but curiosity pulled me forward. Each step felt heavier, as if the air around me was pressing down. The music room door stood slightly ajar, the darkness inside seeming deeper than it should have been. I reached out, barely nudging it open. The room was empty. Chairs stacked neatly in the corner, the piano covered with a sheet, the whiteboard blank. But the humming did not stop. It was coming from right behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. No one was there, just the hallway stretching back, the flickering lights casting long, wavering shadows. A chill ran down my spine. I took a step back, my shoe scuffing against the floor. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, just as I was about to turn and bolt, a whisper brushed against my ear. "You remember me." My vision blurred for a second as my head spun. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of a desk. My mouth was dry. No, this was not real. It could not be. Then the piano, still covered, let out a single echoing note. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sound reverberated through the room, vibrating through my chest. My fingers dug into the wood of the desk as I forced myself to move. I backed toward the door, one shaky step at a time. But as I did, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. My breath came out in a faint mist. Then, from the piano, a voice, barely above a whisper, "You left me here." I did not stay to hear more. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the tile floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, the exit feeling miles away. I did not stop until I burst through the front doors into the cold morning air. For days after, I avoided the music room. I did not tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? But I knew what I had heard. I knew what I had felt. A week later, I passed by the room again, The door was closed this time, locked tight. But as I walked by, a familiar melody drifted through the cracks. I did not stop. I did not look back. But deep in my gut, I knew it was not over. And worse, I knew that whatever was in there, it was waiting for me. The nightmares started soon after. I would wake up drenched in sweat, the melody still ringing in my ears. Sometimes I swore I could hear it just outside my bedroom window, though I lived on the second floor. It made no sense. One night I woke up gasping for air. A pressure weighed down on my chest, like someone was standing over me. My eyes darted around the dark room, searching. There, in the corner, a figure stood. She was barely visible, just a shadow against the moonlit wall. But I knew it was her. I could feel it. My heart pounded. "What do you want?" My voice was barely a whisper. No answer, just a low hum, the same tune from the music room. I shut my eyes tight, willing myself to wake up. When I opened them again, she was gone. The room was silent, but the fear did not leave me. The next morning, I was exhausted, my hands trembling as I brushed my teeth. I could not keep this to myself any longer. I had to know the truth. After school, I went to the library, searching old records. I asked the librarian if she knew anything about the school's past. She frowned, thinking for a moment before nodding. Years ago, a girl named Emily used to play the piano in the music room. She went missing one afternoon. No one ever found her. A shiver crawled up my spine. What happened to her? No one knows, she said. But some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear her play. I left the library in a daze. My hands were ice cold. Emily. That name echoed in my mind, the whisper, the voice. You left me here. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. Then, at exactly midnight, the music began again. You ever had a feeling that someone is watching you? That crawling sensation on the back of your neck? I ignored mine until the night my manager cornered me in the restroom and smiled. I should have left the first time I saw him, standing there, silent, still. Eyes followed me in a way that felt unnatural, as if he were studying something hidden beneath my skin. But I stayed, because when you are 19 and working a late shift at a small-town diner, you learn to ignore a lot of things. At first, I thought he was just a quiet guy. He had been hired as the new night supervisor, a position no one wanted because it meant dealing with drunk customers, broken coffee machines, and the occasional raccoon sneaking in through the back alley. But he never complained. He never spoke much at all. His name was Daniel, a man in his late 40s, with thinning brown hair and a slouch that made him seem smaller than he was. He rarely smiled. When he did, it never reached his eyes. The first week, I barely noticed him. He stayed in the office most of the time, handling paperwork and inventory. If he gave me odd looks, I brushed them off. Maybe he was just awkward, but then I started catching him watching me. It was always subtle, a glimpse from across the room, a shadow shifting in the reflection of the coffee machine. When I turned my head, he would look away. Still, I told myself I was imagining it. Then, one night, I caught him standing by the storage room door. It was 2:15 a.m. The diner was quiet except for the buzzing of the neon sign outside. I was restocking napkins when I noticed movement in the glass door of the freezer, a shape standing just beyond my line of sight. I turned. Daniel was there, half hidden in the darkness of the storage room, his body pressed against the doorway, his head tilted slightly. Watching, my hands froze mid-movement. "Everything okay?" He did not answer right away, just stared for a moment longer, then muttered, "You work hard." His voice was flat, like he was repeating something he had heard before. I forced a laugh. Thanks." He did not move. I swallowed, then grabbed a box of lids and walked briskly back to the counter. The whole time, I felt the weight of his gaze pressing against my back. After that, things got worse. I would step into the break room and find him already inside, sitting silently at the table, facing the door. As if he had been waiting, I would hear footsteps behind me when I took out the trash, only to turn and find him standing too close, hands shoved in his pockets, breathing heavily. One night, I left my phone on the counter and came back to find it unlocked, a message half-typed on the screen. I knew I had locked it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking things. But then came the night I realized I was not. It was a Tuesday, just after closing. The place was empty. The last customers had left an hour ago, and my coworker had just finished mopping the floors. I had to use the restroom before heading home, so I went to the back. The fluorescent light flickered as I stepped inside. The air was cold. I reached for a paper towel. Then I saw it in the small, cracked mirror above the sink. The door behind me was slowly closing, not swinging shut from the air vent, not moving because of a draft. Someone was pushing it. My breath caught I spun around. Daniel stood there, inside the restroom, between me and the exit. His face was blank, his posture rigid. He was too close. Close enough that I could see the uneven rise and fall of his chest. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. My fingers clenched around the edge of the sink. I tried to keep my voice even. Hey, do you need something? No response, just that same empty stare. Seconds stretched, suffocating and silent. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not an embarrassed, oops, wrong door kind of smile. A knowing smile, something sharp and deliberate, stretching too slowly across his face, like he was enjoying the moment. I did not think. I shoved past him with all my strength and ran. Out of the restroom, through the hallway, my shoes squeaking against the tile as I bolted into the kitchen. My coworker looked up, startled. I barely heard myself say, "We need to leave, now." I did not have to explain. She saw the panic on my face. We grabbed our things and left through the back exit. I barely glanced over my shoulder, but as we stepped into the cold night air, I saw a shadow standing in the doorway. Daniel, still smiling. The next morning, I called the owner and told him everything, every detail, the watching, the following, the moment in the restroom. He listened, quiet, then let out a slow breath and said, "You need to come in. The police were here this morning." I felt something tighten in my chest. Daniel had been arrested, not because of what happened with me, not because he was standing a little too close or following me into restrooms, but because of what he had done before he ever stepped foot in our diner. He had worked at another place, another town, different job, same pattern, watching, following, smiling. Then, one night, a girl went missing. She never made it home. They never found her. My hands went cold as I listened. The owner kept talking, but I barely heard him. My mind was stuck on one thought. What if I had stayed in that restroom just a few seconds longer? I quit the next day. Even now, years later, I still feel it sometimes, that crawling sensation on the back of my neck, that feeling of being watched. And sometimes I wonder how many times I turned my back on him and never even knew how close he really was. Hello guys, which story scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for listening, everyone. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.